Part 4 of our Morrowind analysis. This section will cover the great houses Hlaalu, Redoran, and Telvanni. If you haven't seen the earlier parts, links are provided. Time will give context to the name Rethan. He's an Imperial Spellblade, although I jokingly named his class Conman. As such, he went up to the largest building in Balmora, which turned out not to be a manor but a council hall for House Hlaalu, and upon attempting to enrich myself, I decided to join up with the house. Of the three great houses, Hlaalu is the friendliest to Outlanders. This is not just evident in some kind of lore sense, but by the fact that they are themselves the most accessible to new players, who are Outlanders in a way to the game of Morrowind. Of course, there is no way to not be an Outlander, and it plays somewhat in part in the story of Redoran, while Telvanni does not really care. Hlaalu is a merchant establishment, sucking up to the Imperial government on one hand and engaging in a dirty war for monopoly with the other. After joining, you're given the sort of task that is emblematic of Hlaalu. You're given the disguise of a recently deceased Redoran and tasked with deceiving a Redoran quest giver into giving you information. Not only is it a perfect representation of the sort of faction warfare that you'll be getting with Hlaalu, and the lack of values that would cause them to adopt such a tactic, it's a direct interplay with the Redoran questline. Our next objective is to take down a business rival in Vivec. A great deal of House Hlaalu can involve walking around at Vivec, and being at least somewhat conscious to this, I chose the steed as my birth sign. This gave me a 25-point boost to speed, which made my character quite quick. It was, in fact, jarring to go from a character like Wiz, who was very slow, to one like Rethan, who is very fast. The quest itself has a complication. We are stealing an alchemy recipe from an alchemist who has stolen business from the Hlaalu alchemist in Vivec. It pays to do business with Hlaalu. Said alchemist cannot be convinced to give us the scroll, and to further complicate matters, she lives and works in a one-room studio apartment. There are 3 scrolls that can be stolen, the first in a locked chest, the second on her person, and the third on the table by the door. This early in the game, this job is quite difficult, but on the plus side, guards don't try to chase you down for sub 1,000 gold bounties, which naturally means I can just take the scroll off the table, turn around, and walk out the door. And the guards aren't going to come from every corner of Vivec to arrest me for it. We were instructed, while we were here, to meet with Indrino Arethi. She's an alternate quest giver. Between the two, you have enough room to pick which is more convenient and still advance in the faction. Arethi's missions tend to be more focused towards work as an enforcer, while Dorvain's missions tend to be more business-focused. Missions can be as simple as deliver this report across the hall to the treasury, or they can be like, take out a rival businessman's egg mine, but you can report this to him for a reward and not mess up the local economy. I'll give you some highlights for this part and not detail every quest. We're asked to convince a Gwar hide salesman to buy hides from House Hlaalu. He protests that Hlaalu hides are dried out because they have to be shipped from the mainland, whereas Redoran hides come locally from Vvardenfell. The first Redoran quest happens to involve one of the local Gwar herders we're putting out of business, which helps set the tone of each house. This is where the speechcraft system can come into play. It's one of those things that most people I've seen on YouTube don't realize made the big difference in how the game's played. In Morrowind, and Oblivion to some extent, every NPC has a disposition with the player. This is influenced by the player's reputation, their bounty, the faction relationships, and some quests. This disposition can influence the turn of how quests proceed. NPCs with low disposition do not like you, and are less likely to comply with your requests or questions. NPCs with very low dispositions may even refuse to speak with you on topics and deny you access to their services. Disposition can be directly influenced via speechcraft. Now in Morrowind, speechcraft takes the form of 4 options. You can admire, intimidate, taunt, and bribe. Admire and bribe both raise disposition, but admiration's more difficult than bribery. Most people in Vvardenfell are prepared to accept free money, and the Ashlanders even see it as a thoughtful gift. Intimidate, on the other hand, is rarely useful. It relies on you being higher level than the person you're intimidating. As such, it doesn't work at lower levels, and since it doesn't work, it's easy to forget that it's an option when it would work. There is the odd quest where intimidation can be a solution, like this one. It is entirely possible to intimidate the Gwar merchant into doing business with Hlaalu, but since bribery and honey-coated words are often more reliable and easier, intimidate becomes unnecessary. And Bethesda, rather than solving the redundancy by making intimidate more valuable, saw fit to remove it. I won't even go off on a tangent about speechcraft in the later games, although I will say, in having recently replayed the game to get back into the groove of making these videos, I was able to find a bit more use out of Intimidate when I would pair it with calm spells in order to calm NPCs who were hostile down You could intimidate them, which would lower their attack value, and then they would become peaceful. Other options for disposition are as follows. Charm spells can temporarily raise a disposition, and since time stops for conversations in Morrowind, they only need to last a couple seconds to be effective. Imperials also have a racial ability to charm once a day, which I used a bit as a money and a time saver, although it becomes unnecessary later when you get better at speechcraft. Personality can also influence disposition, so if you fortify personality with a spell or with something like Telvanni Bug Musk, or just by having a high personality, you can raise your disposition in the process. Trading is another option. Each time you successfully trade, your disposition will go up. Unfortunately, this is only temporary. So temporary, in fact, that leaving the dialogue window and immediately re-entering it will lose all that disposition. So merchants can be convinced into anything by selling a bunch of a single item repeatedly to them. I like the idea of building a relationship with merchants based on repeat business, but I would change this in two regards. Make the disposition boost permanent, or at least longer lasting, but give a cooldown to transactions to avoid the cheesers who will sell one arrow at a time from becoming best friends with all the merchants. Back to Hlaalu. There's a mission where we deliver orders to a Redoran clothier living in Aldrun as a Hlaalu spy. There's a quest where we have to solve a local murder of a Hlaalu noble. This quest is interesting because there are two principal suspects, but no effective evidence that really exonerates either suspect, so the resolution can be done entirely by judgment. I think most people would agree that the Argonian that stands accused due to racism against the Scalies would be the lesser suspect, since the Dunmer suspect was described by a witness. But I know, as a player of this game, that there was no witness. Otherwise, the suspect would have had a bounty and been arrested the second he left the manor. The final quest from Balmora entails maintaining the Hlaalu monopoly on ebony. The East Empire Company in Ebonheart is threatening to buy ebony from Redoran unless we cut our prices. So we have two options. Convince the head of the EEC to renew the contract for another year, or go assassinate the head of Redoran's only ebony mine and shut down their operations. To be thorough, I did both. Renewing the contract is much easier, since that's simply a disposition check. Assassinating the head of mining operations, Darns Tedelin, is more difficult, as he is a capable spellcaster. Our reward for being thorough, though, is a comfy suit of glass boots, greaves, and a cuirass. Glass armor is a very rare reward, and I appreciate it being the reward you get for going the extra mile on this quest. On the Arethi side of things in Vivec, our first notable quest involves reinforcing Hlaalu fighters who went to Redoran to kill a rogue Telvanni and rescue their prisoner. The Hlaalu sent have messed up the situation, forcing a stalemate between the two sides. I will note now that the other side of this quest is to be dispatched by Telvanni to kill the Hlaalu fighters. This can be a bit of a challenge. Redoran is remote, and both the Telvanni wizard and one of his summons, a Dremora, can pose quite a challenge to new players. To complicate matters still, you can't actually rest in the tower due to there being an inaccessible room full of ghosts preventing resting. It's a neat trick. The wizard, Mylan Faram, has a key to the prisoner's cell, so once he's defeated, it's simply a matter of returning the lost sister back into the Hlaalu force's hands. We also get dispatched to convince the Zainab Ashlander camp to sell their ebony to House Hlaalu. Apparently, they've recently entered the market with their own source. Well, upon arriving at the camp, which tended to bug out and not spawn, we get directed to their Gulakan Ashabal. We can either compliment him, or be direct with obvious results. Then we can hit him with some market logic. If we both sell ebony, the price will drop. This is good for both Hlaalu and the Zainab, as it means that more smiths would be able to access the material, which would result in an increase in sales, and it would weaken the Imperial monopoly on the resource. He will agree to this. If we plead we don't have enough, he will simply end the conversation. Arathi's next quest is to find a sunken wreck and recover its valuable cargo, a Daedric Wakizashi. The rather obvious reward of this quest is the blade itself, rather than the gold. There is only one quest beyond this from Arethi, and more than enough reputation to go around to simply not turn it in and still advance, so I don't, as this is a decent weapon to hold on to for the time being. But to advance in House Hlaalu past the 3rd rank, we need a sponsor. This is true of all houses, and since we're always an Outlander, this is the general response.
Oh.
There is one counselor who would dare to sponsor us, a man famous for writing the Lusty Argonian Maid, yes, the Short Blade skill book. He has a lesser-known work, a play called The Three-Legged Gwar. Gwar are bipeds. How would they... Oh. This man is Crassius Curio, and he's willing to sponsor us for a price. If we strip off all our clothes, he will sponsor us. He doesn't explicitly want anything from us other than our nude figure, so it's kind of a half Me Too moment. Anyways, Curio sponsors us and gives us the instruction to go to Caldera and work for Odrel Helvi, and keep Curio updated on what Helvi has us do. This is good and all, except for the fact that Curio lives atop the Hlaalu canton in Vivec, which means we'll get a lot of trips to the city, and by the way, Hlaalu canton is pretty much as far from fast travel as you can get. Helvi's in charge over in Caldera. We dealt with him in the Thieves Guild questline, stealing his prized history book collection and donating it to charity, and we'll be dealing with him in the Redoran questline. His first orders are to deliver a sealed document to Tanisi Loradri in the Hlaalu vaults. Under no circumstances are we to deliver them to the head of the treasury, Baron Allen. There are a few ways about this quest. The lemming route is to do as he asks as directly as possible. You net a very small reward of only 100 gold. You can also go to Baron Allen, who will pay you 500 gold for reporting to him, but this reflects negatively with Helvi. You can also report it to Ravon Arvel, another Hlaalu counselor, although how exactly you'd figure out to go to him is beyond me. Finally, you can report it to Curio, as he requested initially. You get the 500 gold reward, and he's discreet enough not to let the news of your deception reach Helvi. His next task is to figure out who has stolen the Caldera mining contracts from the Caldera mine, retrieve them, and kill the thief. We have 2 suspects, but can easily narrow it down to 1, El Musa de Mori, and at a high disposition, she will admit the theft and give you the documents. However, she'll ask you let her live. Also, if you're part of the Thieves Guild, she will admit it to you freely. Curio concurs, noting that de Mori is actually a member of the Thieves Guild, adding intrigue to the situation. He suggests I let her escape. I do, and I deceive Helvi as to her identity. He is disappointed, but this does not strain our relationship with the Thieves Guild, whose services I've used to clear bounties and the like during this playthrough. Helvi then asks us to replace some erroneous land deeds of the Ascadian Isles in the Hlaalu Records Office. The deed is fake and can be dealt with in 3 ways. Again, there's the lemming option where you do the task and replace the deed. You can report to Curio, who will have you, quote, buy the deed, unquote, from Baron Allen for a small sum, convincing Helvi that you did the job while changing nothing. The last option is to report it to the landowner, who is Ravon Arvel. He has the best reward, an invisibility ring, and also suggests we copy the real deed and deceive Helvi. Helvi's next task is to collect rent and taxes from 2 farmers in the Isles. They both owe 50 gold each, and we are to kill them if they refuse. The lemming route can go one of 2 ways. The first is that they obviously can't pay the debt, they're farmers, and you kill them. The second is that you can accept one of the farmers' Gwar, Corky, who can then be sold to a Gwar herder for 200 gold, which settles the debt. Or you can go to Curio or Arvel. Curio will give you 500 gold to settle the matter, suspecting Helvi simply wants the farmers dead. Arvel will give you 100 gold and his appreciation. Lastly, you can simply pay out of pocket. This is the fast thing to do. Finally, Helvi has a big request. He wants us to smuggle, covertly transport 5 pieces of raw ebony to Drynar Varion in Aldrun. Now, ebony smuggling is illegal. Although you can't get caught, you can report it. You can also go the lemming route, smuggling the ebony and getting paid 500 gold. Curio suggests we take the ebony to Sagunavis Mantidius at Buckmoth Legion Fort. We have to convince him. This entails giving him the ebony and implicating both Varion and Helvi. Now note here, if you don't have the ebony in your inventory but give him the ebony, it reduces your encumbrance by 50 points, regardless, the weight of the ebony. This means I can still sell the ebony and become even lighter, although this is obviously an exploit. This is Helvi's final mission, as he gets sent to prison afterwards if you go the Curio route. I'm not really sure what happens if you go full lemming with him. I guess he just sticks around and Curio proceeds to give you missions, disappointed at how much of a pushover you are. While we're on the topic of ebony smuggling, let's talk about Vardenfell's controlled substances. Ebony and glass smuggling are illegal as they are rare materials used by the Empire for weapons and armor. Moon sugar and skooma are dangerously addictive substances that plague non-Khajiit societies. Dwemer artifacts are illegal, I assume to discourage the desperate from going on dangerous missions to Dwemer ruins. And ash statues are illegal, as in Vardenfell, the temple is trying to curtail the spread of the 6th house. Some merchants will refuse to do business with you if you're in possession of moon sugar or skooma, the exceptions generally being Khajiit, like Azura at the Balmora Mages Guild, who bought half of Vardenfell's moon sugar supply that I recovered in drug busts during my playthrough. This was an occasional inconvenience since I would try to do business with merchants and happened to be in possession of these substances, so they would refuse. I think there's a missed gameplay opportunity with these substances. For instance, how cool would it be if travel services like boats, silt striders, and teleporters would refuse to transport you if you were in possession of a controlled substance? Suddenly, the quest to implicate Helvi becomes a lot more nuanced because you actually have to smuggle ebony to complete it. You could even add features like guards confronting you if you're carrying materials, taking bribes to look the other way, or adding a bounty if you're caught smuggling. Then, later, when you're a high-ranking member of an official organization, you might be able to acquire a license to possess some of these items. That would raise the restrictions, although clean merchants still might not deal in them. Drugs and ash statues would still be illegal. Unfortunately, later games would go in the opposite direction. The idea of controlled substances was dropped, likely due to players complaining about how inconvenient that merchants wouldn't do business with them while they were carrying drugs, and the Empire stopped enforcing its laws. Anyways, Curio's first mission involves getting an outlaw to pay smuggling fees to Hlaalu. I'll speak of the devil. Most of the quests is finding the outlaw, who is aboard a ship by Hlaalu, and getting him to pay his protection money. I've heard the argument that Curio is anti-corruption. If anything, he is just as corrupt as the best of them. He's simply better at blackmail and deception, being a scheming, conniving Imperial after all. We're in the endgame of House Hlaalu now. First, we need to start our stronghold construction. You can do this very early, and I believe the idea was that you could build your stronghold concurrently while doing the quests, as much of the stronghold process is simply waiting for the actual construction to be done. Each great house builds a stronghold and involves some basic steps. First, the Duke, Vedum Drin, has to assign a construction contract. He does this simply with the request that you have Vardenfell's best interests at heart against the threats posed to it. Then you'll have to pay a member of your house to oversee the project. With Hlaalu, you can haggle with a merchant to get the price down and even trade for it, which is a mechanical demonstration in line with how the faction operates. Mercantile is a broken mess of a skill. It's a shame too, considering how prevalent it is. I don't like the idea of universal skills in Elder Scrolls, those being skills that every class has to engage with. For example, bypassing a lock can be done multiple ways tied to multiple different skills. Convincing somebody can be done through speechcraft or illusion. Mercantile, however, is a bottleneck for all playstyles. There's no build that cannot benefit from having the skill, but at the same time, it's broken. For instance, there's a sweet spot of the skill at around level 70. Past this spot, and trades will actually offer less and less if they have a high disposition. It's weird. Prices can sometimes be better for players with a low mercantile and bribes, which are influenced by mercantile, but instead give experience to speechcraft. Mercantile also levels in a backwards fashion. You would think that you would get more experience turning a 2,500 gold transaction into a 3,000 gold one, but no, you get more experience proportional to the percentage change, meaning that turning a 2 gold sale into a 3 gold sale is a better display of mercantilism than a 500 gold increase on an individual sale. Making money is an important part of Morrowind, more so than Oblivion or Skyrim. In those games, you can simply play and acquire more money than you can ever spend. This is primarily due to trainer costs more than anything else. So, how does one make money in Morrowind? Well, generally, the transaction system is fairly robust. Every item has what is a fair value. When you try to sell an item, the sale price will be lower than the fair value. When you try to buy an item, the sale price will be higher. The spread on these prices is dependent on your disposition and mercantile. In addition, the amount you spend or receive from a transaction can be influenced. The amount you can influence is determined by your mercantile skill. Merchants have a fixed amount of gold to spend on transactions. This amount can be temporarily increased should you use their other services, like training or enchanting. This is important, as many items in Morrowind's late game will exceed the value available to most, if not all, merchants in the game. Thus, trying to get the full value on these items is tricky, but possible. For instance, getting a custom enchantment that costs 50,000 gold, then selling a Daedric weapon at that price is effectively trading that Daedric weapon you aren't going to use anyways for a useful enchantment. But what are the two exceptions I mentioned? Those who've played Morrowind before are likely screaming at me to mention Creeper and the Mudcrab Merchant. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of Mr. Merchant on the Xbox, since he's fairly remote and I didn't want to make the journey, but that's okay. He's just a drunk mudcrab, he looks like all the others. Creeper is a scamp living with orcs who has 5,000 gold. He generally buys most items, barring alchemy ingredients, clothes, and literature. Since he's considered a creature merchant, he has no disposition and will buy and sell items at their fair value, no haggling necessary. The Mudcrab merchant has similar stipulations, but has 10,000 gold to trade, his downsides being the journey across the water and nondescript appearance. There isn't really an in-game reason for these characters provided, barring a vague reference to the Mudcrab from Maik the Liar, so if you aren't reading the wiki, chances are pretty good it could be a long time before you ever run into one of these characters, assuming you didn't kill the Mudcrab while you were passing by. I guess the museum in Mournhold bears mentioning. In Tribunal, there's a museum which can purchase certain artifacts. Most artifacts in the game are priced in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of gold range. They are all exceptionally valuable, as the base value of items is meant to signify those items' rarity. These are the sort of things that end up in the hands of a head of state. Of course, you can acquire many of these items, and most of my characters naturally came into possession of a fair few of them. They can be sold for half value up to 30,000 gold at the Museum of Artifacts. 30,000 gold is generally sufficient to meet all my characters' training needs, although my lack of Xbox footage as of writing this indicates I never did use the museum's services to make money. After a few days, we're tasked with checking in on the Stronghold. This is a way of giving you the location, which for Hlaalu is the Odai Plateau, southwest of Balmora. It's the most convenient of the three locations. After checking in with the foreman and returning with the news, Phase 1 will be complete after a few more days. Phase 2 will entail solving some problem. For Hlaalu, it's increasing the land value by investing in a Kwama mine. We have to cure the Queen of Blight and recruit some miners. After that, a few days pass and Phase 2 is complete. To complete the Great House quest lines, you only ever have to reach the end of Phase 2, although Phase 3 does have some extra benefits. After Phase 1, Curio will tell us that Redoran has constructed their own stronghold at Bal Isra without getting a contract from the Duke. Since this stronghold is an illegal expansion, he sends us to deal with our counterpart in House Redoran, Indaris. At Bal Isra, Indaris isn't much of a fight. He has quite a collection of valuables and his guards can be killed for even more. Afterwards, Curio figures we need more support in House Hlaalu and sends us to get the support of Dram Barrow. Barrow is hidden, so after a small investigation, we're told he's somewhere in St. Olms, Canton. A search of the plaza reveals a haunted manor, inside which is a locked door concealing Barrow and his guards. Barrow is willing to support you if we can defeat his champion, Guarding the Bold. After a fight in the arena, in which Guardian concedes at low health, Barrow supports our nomination. Following this, and Phase 2 of our stronghold, Curio has another mission. This time, House Telvanni has constructed their own illegal stronghold. Again. And we're to eliminate it. We're sent to Tel Uvarith to take on the wizard of the same name. Again, this is not a tough fight, although Uvarith does not have as many valuables as Indaris did, which is weird because Telvanni are usually the ones with the valuable stuff. We are now a house father, and Curio directs us to further work under the Duke, Videm Dren. Thus ends our professional relationship with Crassius Curio. The Duke, himself a former leader of Hlaalu, has some work. Beryl Sala, leader of the Ordinators, has been a pain to House Hlaalu. So why are the Ordinators harassing Hlaalu? While it's not directly stated, the Ordinators are the militant religious branch of the temple, and are members of the Great House Indoral. House Indoral has no territory on Vardenfell, being located entirely on the mainland, and are opposed to the imperial law. So while under the pretense of opposing the 6th House, Indoral is likely using the opportunity to try and expand into Hlaalu territory on Vardenfell. The Duke asks that we speak to Archcanon Tholar Serioni on the matter. He agrees to help control the Ordinator, provided we recover the Robe of St. Rorus, an artifact the Ordinators themselves failed to recover. The artifact is inside of Asamanu, which is, strangely enough, not the only cave or name that is a reference to the Ass Man. Curiously enough, Serioni left out the fact that the cave is occupied by 6th House cultists. Dagoth Hlevul here is in control of 7 sleepers who will give you 1 rep apiece for talking to them thanks to breaking the hold Dagoth has over them. But there's not really a way to know who the sleepers are. It's just one of those happy rewards you get for talking to everybody. The robe isn't all that powerful. It's slightly better than the average healing enchantment you can find at enchanters, but it's not really worth trying to keep. We return the robes, embarrassing the Ordinators who failed in recovering it, and Serioni promises to speak with Beryl Sala about the Ordinator's relationship with House Hlaalu. Drin, impressed, says that advancement to Grandmaster is contingent on control of the Kamana Tong, due to the sway it holds over the rest of Hlaalu's political functions. It is unfortunately in the hands of Orvis Drin, the Duke's brother. He would greatly prefer we find a non-lethal solution to the problem, but admits it is a last-ditch effort. Orvis will doubt our ability to run an enterprise like the Kamana Tong and wants to know how he can trust us. I use my natural Imperial ability to temporarily deceive him into agreeing, just as Tiber Septim did with Vivek. A potential alternate solution for the enterprising Hlaalu who somehow sucks at speechcraft, which should be rare, is to find a note that implicates Orvis in a conspiracy to assassinate his brother for interfering with his smuggling business and use it as blackmail. The last solution is to kill him, which displeases the Duke, but he will still promote you. This can potentially be a part of the Thieves Guild and Morag Tong quest lines. There's quite a few quests that will correspond here, even the main quest. And thus, we become the Grandmaster of House Hlaalu. Now, Rethin's story is not finished. He will feature again in Part 5. I'll also be going into more conclusive thoughts into Hlaalu after discussing the other two houses. But until then, House Redoran. Jib-Indaris was a saint. He was known as Saint Jib, the Eradicator. He went down in history for his feat of driving the Cliff Racers out of Morrowind. Hey, this is me in editing. I was planning on doing the Saint Jib stuff like 2 months before the Young Scrolls EP came out, so serendipitous thinking, I guess. Saint Jib is a rather comical reference to the first character you meet in Morrowind, having been put through the Skyrim Retconia into becoming a hero. But are Cliff Racers really as annoying as people claim?
Good grief.
Yes, they are faster than 300 speed. They can block your attempts to rest. They make an ungodly noise and tend to gang up on you when working around the ghost fence, all the while being difficult to actually hit. It's very little surprise they are hated, and that a gag character was created to jokingly drive the species extinct. Jib-Indaris is, then, fittingly our protagonist in the story of House Redoran, the early years on his path to sainthood. House Redoran is, in a sentence, the honor house of Morrowind. Although they would say this is because of their virtue, I attribute this to the fact that their historical holdings are very close to the Nords. They are home in Aldrune and thus must be traveled to from Balmora in order to join. Our first quest, working under Redoran, is to take care of some mud crabs that have harassed the citizens' Gwar herd. This is a quest that requires specific attention be paid to the navigational directions given, since it's very easy to get lost on the way there. And sure enough, mud crabs have been killing and dragging Gwar off into the swamp. We kill them and get paid by the herder and weed. As for our reward from Naminda, our steward, nothing. We get nothing. Our next task is to deliver a cure disease potion to Ald Valathi. It's a remote fishing village lacking any fast travel options, although it is fairly close to Cool. We are told, while we're up there, by the ranking member of Redoran that he may have further work for us, but for now to return to Naminda. Our reward is again, nothing. While up near Ald Valathi, we find a woman who dropped her ring. She offers to pay us in sexual favors if we get it for her. Only it's a trap, and Azura herself points out the folly of our actions.
No good deed goes unpunished, Outlander.
Luckily, players good enough to survive, or good enough to exploit the AI, are rewarded with the Amulet of Shadows, which gives an 80-point chameleon effect, basically turning us invisible when we use it. A trader went missing near Margan or Nisus. Nobody in Nisus knows anything, but the people in Margan do. Apparently a recent ash storm hit, and it was bad by Vardenfell standards. A trader apparently ended up going near an ancestral tomb west of town, right before the storm hit. Sure enough, we find the trader in the tomb. The door apparently had gotten stuck during the storm. We take him back to Margan and get our reward. Nothing. Next, we're tasked with retrieving a founder's helm stolen by Alvis Terry of Hlaalu. He stole the helm from an ancestral tomb and has taken to wearing it at a bar. We need to maintain our house honor and avoid simply murdering him and retrieving the helm. I sexually assault him, grabbing his ass, incurring a 25 gold bounty, and apparently also the legal right to murder him. I don't think this normally works, it's not supposed to, but hey, we got the helm and it didn't count as murder. I even do the honorable thing of stripping his corpse of all his armor and selling it to a merchant. Then I turn myself in, pay off the rather small bounty, and walk free to claim my reward. Nothing. The Gwar herder is having trouble again, this time with bandits stealing Gwar. Naminda remarks most bandits in Vardenfell are outcast Ashlanders, but it actually turns out to be a diverse bunch of Outlanders. This is where I really demonstrate how broken the Amulet of Shadows is, since the AI can't really handle dealing with an attacker who is invisible and stays invisible when in Chameleon. So I should explain. There is invisibility, and there is chameleon. Invisibility is a flat effect. If you have it, you are fully invisible. However, interacting with anything, and I mean anything, breaks the effect. Talking to someone, going through a door, picking up an item, anything. Chameleon has a point value, meaning magic costs can vary based on the effect value. Chameleon improves your chances of not being detected, so it's more costly than invisibility, but has the benefit of allowing the effect to continue through actions. An 80-point chameleon is effectively invisible. Most NPCs in the game cannot see you with it on. And it doesn't break when we attack, meaning NPCs can do nothing except try to run away when I use this amulet. It is quite powerful, although it is also limited by its charge, taking a bit to recharge enough to use again, so I don't solve every problem with it. If we return to the herder, she'll pay us in more weed. Naminda doesn't pay us at all for the work. Let's sidetrack and go to Hlaalu. Our first mission there is to take care of an old menace that has returned to plague the village, Old Bluefin. It's a slaughterfish, and a tough one, although its heightened abilities are still limited by the fact that while I'm on land, I do not exist to aquatic creatures. And get this, in exchange for dealing with a threat to public safety, I get paid. Albeit in 10 Drew Wax, but hey, Drew Wax is worth 100 gold apiece. Albeit this is a fighter character, so he's not going to get anywhere near that, but it's still a payment for services rendered. Actually, Redoran itself wasn't even going to pay me, it was the fishermen in the village who all pitched in to reward me for taking care of a problem. Next, we're sent to the Ashimanu mine to deal with an infected shock. Another trip to the Assman cave. It's really that simple, and of course, we aren't paid for the job. We're then sent to deal with a Kagudi den near Ashimanu mine. But instead of the Kagudi in the den triggering the quest, we have to kill a Kagudi on the road near it to do it properly. No reward. We're asked to check in on some soldiers sent to Shishi, a Telvanni base. After a fun trip up there, we meet up with the men. They say they've cleared the base, although the lead wizard has yet to be found. You can turn the report in now, although you can also ask another man who keeps hearing sounds somewhere downstairs. Turns out with some exploration that a Breton skull reveals a hidden basement where the wizard is hiding. With him taken care of, we return to Hlaalu for our reward of nothing. At this point, our path forward in the house is to seek a sponsorship. Lucky for us, Athen Serethi is under attack from assassins. We go and defend him. And although there is no reward, he does offer to sponsor us. Oh, no, wait, there is a reward. We get paid the standard guard rate of 200 gold. So why have I been pointing out the fact that Redoran has been so stingy in paying us for our work? Factions in Morrowind have a requirement that the factions of later games lacked: skill requirements. Each faction has a list of skills they favor and requirements to meet to climb those ranks. The real stopper is that the highest ranks of factions require skills be higher than 80. For most people, this is easily attainable just by playing the game. Pure mages may need to train a bit due to magic skills training slowly, but for anyone using a skill that involves bashing things, playing the game like a normal human being is good enough. None of my characters, however, were played like normal human beings. Because of the way I took notes and the recording limitation of hard drive space, each character was played generally focusing down one faction at a time. This means that every character inevitably fell short when it came to skills. The way you're meant to offset this in Morrowind is through trainers. This, however, is costly, and I feel as though the real victors of Morrowind's story are the skill trainers who became rich as a consequence.
What would you do if you had an eternity to do nothing but wait? Do you keep busy? Do you daydream? Do you freak out? Tell me what you want. Trained. can someone get so into something that nothing else matters?
Some guilds provide adequate enough income to achieve this. House Hlaalu often paid out 500 or even 1,000 gold for tasks completed, while the Thieves and Fighters Guild provided plenty of opportunities to make money while questing. House Redoran does not. The average quest for House Redoran has no reward. There quickly came a very real problem where I simply could not advance in the house due to skill limitations that were caused by the fact that I wasn't being paid. Now, the way that a normal person deals with this is to go adventure, which I generally did not do due to recording, or to go do another faction that does pay, which I also could not do due to my note-taking. So when House Redoran refused to pay me, I forced them to. See, at a point you are recommended to go speak with Feral Redoran in Vivec. He has a decent number of quests for the house. However, finding Redoran was a pain. I wasn't given adequate directions, and I searched most of Redoran Canton for the bastard. Then I found the Redoran Treasury. It turns out they've been holding out on me. They were not poor, these were not hard times, and I was not doing charity work. They're rich, like real fucking rich. And turns out in the process of getting to the treasury, I had stolen a key that could unlock the door. Gradually, the ordinators would path out, and I would close the door behind them until none were left in the room. Then I looted it. I got a free set of ebony armor and a ton of valuables. Went to Creeper and offloaded it. Suddenly, what was my poorest character became my richest, and then I spent 25,000 gold training my skills to become high enough that I wouldn't need to worry about it again. So you see, it wasn't a matter of me acting dishonorably and acquiring large amounts of material possessions. It was me satisfying the needs of the guild for strong leadership while compensating myself for the sweat off my back. Since I got my hands on a full set, let's talk about ebony armor. Armor in Morrowind is divided into 3 classifications: light, medium, and heavy. Clothes also count as unarmored, I guess, but you wear those under your armor. It works simply enough. The better the protection offered by armor, the heavier it is. Lighter armor meant you could carry more, but it also meant sacrificing armor value. Medium armor was a happy medium, but it was offset by the fact that it was rare to find. Ebony is heavy armor, and it is heavy, but it is also good at protecting the body, provided you had the skill to wear it. It's not as simple as equipping Daedric armor and then being protected. You had to be conditioned to wear the armor to see the benefits. Characters in light armor will score a higher armor value if they have a high skill, compared to characters in heavy armor with a low skill. Ebony is also some of the best heavy armor we'll be getting. Daedric is better, but it's also exceptionally rare. Equipment in Morrowind isn't as simple as saying, oh, well, this has the biggest number, so I'll wear that. Wearing partial sets means you have more room in your inventory to carry loot. It can also mean you move faster since you aren't as weighed down. Equipment was also made with the idea in mind that it should be appropriately rare. It's a sign of mastery and danger to see an opponent wearing glass or ebony armor. Almost exclusively will you see guards wearing bone mold, orcs wearing orcish, and ordinators wearing endoral armor. Ranks with legionaries can be told by their armor set. Morrowind's design philosophy towards armor seems more so geared towards lining the armor skills up with the armor that is diegetically a part of the game world, rather than designing armor sets around the mechanics in tiers. I think this is better as it can feel a bit stilted how the world gradually escalates its usage of armor types in Oblivion and Skyrim. While I discuss armor, I should also mention durability. Durability, in the eyes of some, is an annoyance that must never again enter the design of video games. I disagree. Durability is a factor to consider in the preparation before trips. It's also an element that can introduce surprise into a situation. A piece of armor or weapon breaking forces the player to adapt to what is an unexpected situation. However, I can understand why durability is disliked. It can be seen as tedious to maintain equipment, and video games aren't supposed to be more tedious than real life, right? I guess, and to some extent, Morrowind does fall victim to durability falling on the side of tedium as a mechanic. Higher end items are more durable as traits, which in turn means a reward for good gear is not having to repair it as often. If that is a reward, then why have the mechanic? I did like the Oblivion idea of allowing skilled armorers to boost their durability above 100%, although, again, that ultimately begs the question of why bother with the mechanic if the reward is to not have to deal with it. To me, durability should represent the prospect of potentially losing an item if it's broken. This would make routine preventative maintenance more rewarding, but obviously this also creates the risk of losing something valuable, potentially even irreplaceable. That does, however, reward the higher end items with high durabilities, since it decreases the chance you'll lose the item since you would have such a long window to repair it. Think of it like this: lots of games, including Elder Scrolls games now apparently, have hunger mechanics. Why do hunger mechanics exist? Like durability, they are an intentional annoyance that is dealt with in an arbitrary fashion. Proponents, however, argue that hunger is a good mechanic because it rewards preparation, or because it can make a tough situation where there is limited access to food or repair more tense as a consequence. It also carries the consequence of death as a failure state, which is more punishing than the consequence of simply losing an item, even temporarily. Durability is an intentional annoyance, but intentional annoyances are kind of the point of video games. What is an enemy in a game but an intentional annoyance standing between you and hollow victory? Saying that durability being removed from Skyrim is justifiable because it was only annoying anyways opens a rather nasty can of worms when it comes to the question of why we even play video games in the first place. Anyways, let's get back on track with House Redoran, since we should be done training by now. To start, we need to get our sponsorship from Cerethi, and advance far enough to start our Stronghold. I learned from my last playthrough to not put it off, and to start it so I can do it while I'm also doing the quests. Like before, we need the construction contract from the Duke. He has the same request, our pledge to help Morrowind against its enemies. The person overseeing our construction also needs 5,000 gold to finance the process. Unlike Hlaalu, this is non-negotiable. Luckily, we have plenty of cash to spare from robbing the Redoran treasury, so in a way it is free. Now that the process has started, we can get to work for Cerethi. He will sponsor us provided we can rescue his son from Bolvin Venom, who has kidnapped him. Sure enough, a note in Venom's manor reveals that they are entertaining a special guest, and it is Cerethi's son. The guards get mad if we try to let him out, although using Chameleon kind of breaks this quest. Anyway, Cerethi, reunited with his son, promotes us. Although there is still no reward, we also no longer need it. Our next task is to deal with the principal reason Cerethi's son was kidnapped. He has been accused of murder. Well, maybe let the Imperial Guards handle it, it's what they get paid to do. Athen claims that his son is innocent, as the victim was friends with his son. Even though there is a witness, Athen figures his son may have been under a spell, and requests we check his room. Sure enough, we find a suspicious ash statue. Varver will say he's been having odd dreams since he received the statue and asks us to take it. We then get directed to take the statue to Loros Serrano over at the temple, who asks you to arrange a meeting with him and his son and exonerates Varver of murder, since he was likely under the influence of the 6th house. This was likely done as Cerethi's house is friendly to Outlanders, a stance the 6th house does not tolerate. Now that Cerethi's house has been sorted, we can get back to the real work, which is defending House Redoran from slander. Our contact and Vivek give us a similar mission, and here's how they contrast. Andres Norano, a Hlaalu noble, notable as he had his key stolen from him by Steals Your Wallet, has been slandering House Redoran. We are to honorably duel him, emphasis on honorably, as simply killing him would be a PR nightmare for Redoran. He accepts the duel, but is woefully unprepared and loses. Contrast this with Meryl Hlaalu, who is accusing a Redoran counselor of adultery. Hlaalu will not honorably duel anybody, and is likely just saying that as he is under the influence. I decide to handle the situation appropriately.
You will die.
I murder him. Naturally, this looks bad, so allow me to explain my logic. The way Meryl wants you to deal with the situation is to either stoke his ego until he accepts to withdraw the slander or to bribe him. These are positive reinforcements for negative behavior, and would only encourage other rowdy youth of Hlaalu to join in on the slander. Since blood would eventually be drawn on a larger scale from such an outcome, nipping this behavior in the bud is important. We positively reward Norano by not killing him as he abides our traditions and faces us in a duel. We negatively reward Hlaalu by murdering him as he acts dishonorably. So although the reputation of Redoran is hurt in the short term by this action, in the long term we have saved lives and preserve our honor. That's not how the game sees it. I figure I'm not going to hear the end of it from Redoran for this, so I just go back to Cerethi. Next, he wants me to deal with smugglers in Shurenbal. This is an easy affair, although the cave in question is remote. While I'm out, I check in at Aldvalathi. Virith has a new request. A local Daedroth worshipper named Gordal is wanted by the people of Aldvalathi. This should be a challenge. However, my spear and his broken AI actually make it quite easy. He's also wearing a full set of ebony. I think this was intended to be the turning point in Redoran where you start to gear up, since the reward for this is an enchanted ebony spear, a free set of ebony armor that Gordal was wearing, but I already have a free set of ebony armor from the Redoran treasury, so... I know this is a bit of a non sequitur, but let's talk about my spear. Spears are great. They allow you to do damage at a distance at the cost of being long and unwieldy to use. Naturally, something as varied and unconventional as a spear in an RPG setting was cut from the later games for the usual swords, axes, and maces. I suspect spears were cut from Oblivion due to the skill crunch, that being the reduction in the number of skills from 27 to 21. Each specialization went from 9 skills to 7. Axe and blunt were combined, medium armor was cut from the game, but to facilitate the cuts in stealth spec, hand-to-hand got moved into combat, while short blade was combined into blade. This meant that combat spec still had one more skill to reach the desired 7, so the spear was lost from the game. Spears as weapons are historically associated with formation fighting, something that generally never came about in the Elder Scrolls setting due to the prevalence of destruction magic. Their popularity, instead, is owed to regions that routinely have to deal with disease, Valenwood and Morrowind. For Morrowind in particular, the threat of blight and corpus makes spears a popular option amongst the buoyant armigers, as it allows them to stay out of reach of the sick. Since the Imperial legions generally don't engage in formation fighting, there wasn't a pressing lore reason to keep spears around in Oblivion. The other argument is that spears simply were not popular. Although I'd personally disagree, I can imagine that swords are handily the most popular, since as a weapon they are by far the most publicized. However, it's a situation where Bethesda engineered their unpopularity. Spears are uncommon, and upgrades few and far between. Contrast this with swords, which are very common, with many opportunities to upgrade, and with many of the game's most powerful weapons being swords. It's the same story with medium armor. It was given the short end of the stick in Morrowind, so people didn't use it, so it wasn't popular, so it got cut. Rather than try and keep spears, medium armor, and, well, throwing weapons for that matter in the game, and fixing the issues they had while abandoning the ridiculous idea that each specialization needs to be balanced in a single-player game, the skills were simply dropped. The weapon skills of Morrowind provide a great deal of nuance for fighting characters. You can't just pick up any weapon you find out in the world and use it like a master. Short blades, long blades, axes, blunt weapons, spears, and hand-to-hand were all different skills that played almost like martial arts. Short blades are fast and light so they can work as backup weapons. Long blades are slower, two-handed long blades especially slow. Axes are great for chopping, although their historical value of breaking wooden shields and fortifications is underappreciated. Blunt weapons don't serve their purpose of breaking armor, spears provide a longer reach, and hand-to-hand damages fatigue until knockout, and then does damage. You can also go straight to damage using Paralyze. It has the obvious upside of having no weight. I think they should have expanded on hand-to-hand. I know in Oblivion they added the special attacks, which is cool, but I'm thinking like special techniques that work like spell creation, like Paralyzing Fist. Just something that looks like a martial arts anime, but lets you use a spellmaker to make your own moves. Instead, what was the most distinct fighting style, at least from its counterparts at the time, was cut come Morrowind. I suspect it's another in the long list of victims of scaling, where in an effort to fix the problems posed by scaling mobs in Oblivion, instead of fixing scaling, they quote fixed unquote everything else. Just another victim of the skill crunch, although for hand-to-hand, its day came between Oblivion and Skyrim. Serethi has a new request. A Redoran noble has gone mad and has taken up residence in a cave called Milk, harassing travelers and demanding tribute. We need to solve the situation, however the nobleman in question is a friend of Serethi's, so we need to do this non-lethally if possible. He suggests I speak with his father in Ebonheart. While I'm in Ebonheart, I hear a rumor about unrest in Cyrodiil City, something about the legitimacy of the heirs. I don't think this will be relevant. I meet with Mandus' father, who says his son went mad after his granddaughter was kidnapped by the Telvanni lord Divith Fear. He thinks finding and returning the daughter should cure his madness. This entails a trip to the remote Tel Fear. There's no fast travel points, as the man in question can't be bothered to do something so foolish. Once inside, we meet with Divith, who doesn't actually care if we take Mandus' daughter, he's far too busy. We let her out, and she gives us an amulet to take to her father. We do, making liberal use of Chameleon to dodge his guards, who have taken to dealing with intruders with the sharp end of the sword. And when we give him the amulet, he says he'll stop demanding tribute, calming the guards down. Serethi says that in order to advance, we need support from other counselors. He suggests we start with the counselors Morvain and Remoran. Morvain, or rather Morvain's wife, requests that we clear out her manor of corpus beasts. Turns out they had killed her husband after they had received an ash statue, and not only did House Redoran take the time to decide to let her take his spot as counselor, they haven't dealt with the manor full of corpus beasts that is drawing more to it on the edge of town. Our man Serrano is in the temple and is willing to destroy the ash statue after we retrieve it. Redoran wants a bit more. He wants us to go up to Nisus and collect taxes, 60 gold pieces, and if we pay out of pocket, he'll refuse to give us support and soft lock our game. So after the round trip to Nisus, we're then tasked with finding a girl he's lusted after for years. Turns out she has a similar name to his personal bodyguard, who happens to be lusting after him, and at that suggestion offers his support. You know, 3 paragraphs ago I was at a tower where the guy cloned himself 4 times and spent his days researching a cure for corpus and low-key banging his clones, so I'll let this slide. Anyways, we're a counselor now, and to advance, we need more counselors to support us, as well as phase 2 of our stronghold. We need guards, and are directed to the local fighters guild master, Perseus Mercius, to recruit them. He says he's willing to waive the fee if we free his friend from prison. Sadly, there is no option to just pay him, and we end up going to Vivec, freeing his friend, killing an ordinator, and returning. As for the counselors, we need the support of Larethi and Erebar. Venom will never give his support due to his vehement opposition to Outlanders, but as long as we have the support of all the other counselors, we can stand to claim the title of Archmaster. Larethi is willing to support us provided we can shut down the Caldera mining operation. This is not as simple as going and wiping it out, we need to do it honorably. So we start with trying to find proof of corruption. Odral Helvi, local corrupt overlord of House Hlaalu, has some secret ledgers hidden in his room that provide such proof. With evidence in hand, we can now shut down the mine. We're saving the evidence in the event that Duke asks any questions about why we took these actions. We learn from Caldera locals that if Dalina, a slave at the mine, were to be freed or killed, that the slaves would revolt. I free her. Larethi says it was an unconventional solution, but it did end the Hlaalu market domination. As for Erebar, he seems preoccupied and refuses to speak on the subject of our support. Sarethi figures he may be getting influenced by the Telvanni, and we need to figure this out to gain his support. Asking around Telvanni town reveals that Master Neloth and Telnaga is holding Erebar's daughter hostage. Those damn ANCAPs keep stealing our daughters. Anyways, I free her and the guards take exception to this, but since the non-aggression pact is at the heart of the Telvanni law, there are no questions asked about the dead guards. And since I successfully stole her, she is now my property, at least until we get back to Redoran territory. Erebar gives us our support on the council and a Redoran master helm. Well, a replacement helm anyways, the original was stolen. And after some waiting, our stronghold finishes phase 2, and Sarethi fills us in on Bolvin Venom. Bolvin was a successor to a long line of incompetent Redoran leadership. He was the one who, after the armistice, brought Redoran to Vardenfell. He effectively brought the house back from the brink of ruin. He, however, did so via strength of arms and a hatred of Outlanders. And in the modern era, this has put Redoran in a bad position. The house's view on tradition and honor has allowed it to be taken advantage of by Hlaalu and Telvanni. In 2 instances, Redoran was forced to deal with slander from Hlaalu, who abused the fact that Redoran took their honor seriously. In 2 instances, Redoran nobles had their children stolen by Telvanni, who abused the fact that Redoran followed the law so strictly. Sarethi hopes for someone to lead Redoran who shares his quality of strong martial prowess and military leadership, but better understands the modern Redoran situation needs to treat its citizenship with kindness and justice, rather than alienating them. And as a counselor, with support of all the other counselors, he figures that we are fit to rule, but Venom will not allow an Outlander to become Archmaster. Thus, we must challenge him to an honorable duel. Venom initiates the conversation with his own challenge, to fight at the Vivec Arena. This is the logical action as Venom is likely confident that he is stronger than Indaris, and if he wins, he can remove an Outlander from the council. He's a tough fight, full ebony with a Daedric weapon. I suspect this quest involved a free full set of ebony and ebony spear were likely preparatory for this conflict. It also helps I'm high level thanks to rank requirements. Did you know that Redoran consider looting the bodies of those you defeat dishonorable? So you don't get paid for your work, theft is dishonorable, looting is dishonorable, and stronghold payments are non-negotiable. You're just supposed to make whatever meager sum you can, die, pass it on to your kids who combine it to their meager sum, until after 1,000 generations your descendants have enough to maybe get sponsored. Is it actually possible to maintain your honor and make it to the end of a Redoran questline? Maybe it's some kind of mechanical storytelling. Anyways, we're Archmaster as soon as we defeat Venom. You Morrowind regulars might recognize that this playthrough did not engage in the House Wars quests. This is because they were subsequent to the one Slander quest where I murdered the guy, which was unappreciated. You are able to complete Redoran without fighting the other factions. I believe this is also possible in Hlaalu, but I'm not sure about Telvanni. Jib and Doris will return in part 5. As for now, Uvarith was inspired by one of the characters on the Xbox loading screens. This guy. Yeah, you PC players might recognize the ones with the monsters, but there are a few new ones with characters on the Xbox. Since I spent so long on loading screens, I thought of a few memes that these screens are perfect for. Anyways, I was inspired by one with an Altmer vampire mage holding a Daedric Dai katana. Originally, I was planning on having Uvarith be a vampire. Vampires in Morrowind are excluded from most factions on principle except Telvanni, because ANCAP rules. But upon further inspection, some of the quest scripting gets broken due to vampirism, specifically due to certain quests which rely on introductory text, which gets replaced when you are diseased. So sorry guys, I ended up not getting any footage of vampire gameplay. So I'm going to throw this in post-com to try and explain why vampires are broken in Morrowind. There's a hierarchy of greetings that NPCs will use when meeting the player, which are either specific to them, quest-related, or general greetings that are shared among multiple NPCs. This hierarchy is based on the logical importance of the greeting, with stuff like locations, clothes, and classes having lower priority over quests, factions, and combat-related greetings. This is why in the next part a certain quest line is broken if you approach NPCs naked. Now, when you contract vampirism, most NPCs will get a general hostile greeting. Telvanni, on the other hand, gets a friendly greeting. The problem has to do with how you progress a certain quest. Because one quest relies on a custom greeting that is always replaced with the vampirism greeting, you will never receive it. In addition, the aforementioned Stronghold quest that is standard for each great house is also impossible, as the Duke will not speak to you if you're a vampire. I have zero basis to say this, but I'm fairly confident that vampirism was a late stage feature that was added to the game, as it is very basic and your options as a vampire are fairly limited. But I am surprised that since it was supposed to be a feature that vampires could join Telvanni, that this issue was not noticed. I know it's a meme to say Bethesda doesn't do QA, but if you have any experience working with the construction set, you'll know they would have had to have been doing some because of just how many lollipop sticks and cum this engine's made out of. To fix this issue, all you have to do is take this intro from Greeting 5 and put it in Greeting 1 so it takes priority over the vampirism greeting in Greeting 2. Although this wouldn't fix it on the Xbox version since it has a special patched version. And actually, now that I think about it, they did fix the Dark Brotherhood glitch between the PC and Xbox releases. But I guess nobody had tried playing Vampire in House Telvanni during that time period. Or if they did, they didn't complain on the internet. Anyways, back to the scheduled analysis. Uvarith spent a short stint with the Balmora Mages Guild getting some basic spells set up for our future plans with House Telvanni. Telvanni starts in Sadrith Mora, which is an interesting town in its own right. For starters, I think you're supposed to come into the town via boat, go through the Gateway Inn and be introduced to the Hospitality Papers, which is a scam being run on Outlanders. Only I would wager most people get to Sadrith Mora for the first time through the Mages Guild at Wolverine Hall, since it's the superior form of travel. What stands out about the town is its buildings. Truly, in the world of identical adobe structures, the Mushroom House is king. Telvanni buildings are often twisted, conforming to the demands of nature rather than any functional design, perhaps a reflection of the more naturalistic philosophies of Telvanni, seeing the strengths of individuals as more important than the needs of common folk. While Balmora, Aldrune, and especially Vivec are heavily populated urban centers, Sadrith Mora is lacking in commoners. Almost every person in Telvanni, which is more racially diverse a faction than even Hlaalu, possesses entrepreneurial spirit or a talent of some kind. You'll find that there is a surprising lack of Sixth House sleepers in Telvanni territory, an affliction caused by a weak sense of individuality that allows the Sixth House to control the sleepers. In the same vein, the tribunal temples of Telvanni are token gestures. The masters of Telvanni are as old as the gods themselves, so the temple has little place in their society. You can also perceive this as a negative since the temple does perform services for the poor, but there aren't many poor in Telvanni society. Thus, Telvanni society is in fact very progressive, but for how ideal it sounds, it has its flaws, as will be demonstrated. Joining Telvanni involves entering the council house and, well, the frame rate is not good in here on Xbox. Telvanni has a very unusual quest structure for Morrowind. Most factions in Morrowind will typically send you quest giver to quest giver. Each one have 5 or 6 tasks to complete. For the early days of Telvanni, you simply contract through the mouths or the masters themselves. Members of the Telvanni Council are represented by mouths in Sadrith Mora. They represent the interests of the Telvanni, while their lords can continue their research in their towers. Tasks requested of you include things like retrieving alchemical ingredients, finding artifacts, and performing deliveries. And the rewards for these quests, rather than being gold, are often spells or artifacts. In fact, you can learn Mark and Recall very early in the house. I greatly appreciate that a magical faction actually teaches magic as part of its quest structure. So instead of having 2 quest givers each giving 5 quests, you have 5 quest givers each giving 2 quests. The progression is also much more forgiving. You don't really have to complete all the quests to get to the sponsorship stage. Early on, I am asked to deliver a skirt to Mistress Thorana of Telbernora. I am advised by her mouth to be prepared to use an intervention spell should anything happen. This is because Thorana has gone crazy. She keeps a naked Khajiit as a pet, and when you offer to give her the skirt, she accuses it of being cursed and asks you to put it on to prove it isn't, only to then attack you for doing so.
You will suffer greatly.
Another task entails delivering a note to Telfir and returning. It sounds unremarkable until you realize that Telfir has no fast travel services. Water walking is an alteration spell. I mean, without water walking, what else is there? Looking at you, Skyrim alteration, looking at you. It plays an especially important role in Morrowind since so much of the terrain has been geared towards aquatic travel. Now, while Oblivion did have the ability, it really wasn't as important since there wasn't much need for it. I mean, sure, there was an inland sea, but honestly, with fast travel and a lack of need to go out on the water again, you don't need it. Skyrim was much the same way. There were some attractions out off the coast, but for the most part, water walking was unnecessary. But lack of necessity doesn't mean the spell should just be cut. Speaking of cuts, Levitate is another good option for avoiding the swim. It also performs the function of vertical access, such as in Telvanni towers which don't have stairs, or in dungeons with secret areas. Levitate was cut from Oblivion, the reason being exterior-interior hybrid cells. The cities would be in cells separate from the overworld in order to help with performance, and Levitate would expose the fact that the cities and the countryside were not seamless. I think there were better ways to handle the issue. Mournhold and Tribunal, for instance, didn't allow levitation for much the same reason, so perhaps there could be a magical bullshit lore reason to stop people from flying over the walls. I think most players would understand the limitation. The real reason they wouldn't, and perhaps won't, adopt this rule set is a shift in dungeon design. I made a game of noting dungeons in Oblivion and Skyrim that would feature drop-offs near the entrance that would lead to the end of the dungeon, leading to a circular loop design. The need to deposit players near the entrance of the dungeon by the end quickly without giving crafty players the ability to take the back entrance simply necessitates the restriction of vertical navigation, hence why jump spells and acrobatics went as well. I disagree with this need. I think if anything, the new dungeon design could be complemented with a proper use of Mark and Recall to return to the dungeon entrances, but then again, did I make the most successful RPGs of all time? I didn't think so. Now while I'm on the subject, eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed I'm using a couple spells named Efficient Water Walk and Efficient Levitate. Ignore the letters, I just used those to organize the menu. Those are custom spells, designed to give me a more magicka-efficient version of the effects. Water walking is basic. Mostly its magicka needs translates to the duration you'll be water walking. The nice thing about setting its duration to 10 seconds is that it allows me to duck under the water quickly without waiting around, and it only requires one magicka to cast, which is very nice. The Levitate spell is much the same, although it's a little more expensive for a little more convenience. Levitate's magicka costs are tied to its duration as well as its strength. Levitate strength affects how quickly you move. A 1-point levitate is simply way too slow, but on the flip side, you can become very fast using a 100 or even a 500-point levitate scroll, although casting those spells would be very demanding on magicka. And as I said, many Telvanni homes have a vertical tube between you and its master, levitate sort of serving as a filter in Telvanni society. Spell creation can be quite versatile and even broken. You might wonder how, so I posit Fortify attribute and skill. I didn't get any footage of me abusing these spells fully, so let me explain. Lots of variables in Morrowind, and Oblivion for that matter, are tied into complex formulas. Since these formulas don't have any kind of cap to them, you can very quickly boost your skills into the hundreds, even temporarily, to some amusing effects. For 1 second, you can boost your speechcraft or mercantile and get a good deal or convince NPCs of basically anything. You can boost your speed and move very quickly. Perhaps the most infamous example commonly known are a trio of scrolls labeled as Icarian Flight, which temporarily boost acrobatics 1,000 points for 7 seconds. This can send you soaring across the map, but the effect doesn't last long enough for the landing, as evidenced by its creator's fate. One of the reasons I don't mind escort quests in Morrowind is the fact that I can fortify other people's speed and make them move faster. With custom spells, you can tailor illusion effects like Frenzy or Calm or other effects like Command to specific humanoids. Also notable is custom destruction spells. You can have a untouched death spell that targets all elements. Tailor custom spells to specific races to avoid resistances, such as a frost spell for Dunmer and a fire spell for Nords. Create a spell that can snipe a specific opponent, or a spell that targets a wide area, and the amount of magicka spells require is the great limiting factor. On a hand-to-hand character, I had a spell that would damage fatigue to speed up the process, or spells that would absorb other people's fatigue into my own pool. Spell creation tickles the wizard fantasy quite well. Unfortunately, it was too limited in Oblivion and removed in Skyrim. In Oblivion, the spells you could create and cast were hard limited in effectiveness by your skill level. So for example, if you create a spell that does 100 points of damage health on touch in Morrowind, your limitations in casting the spell are the amount of magicka it costs, and your chance of casting based on your intelligence and destruction. If you don't meet the magicka requirement, you obviously can't cast a spell unless you find a creative solution around that, such as Fortify Magicka potions. If you don't meet the skill requirement, you still have a chance at casting it, and barring that, you can still find the ways to boost the necessary skills to create a chance. In Oblivion, it's simply a threshold of, you have met the level requirement, you are now permitted to cast this spell. And even that is better than Skyrim's, there's a handful of pre-selected spells that everyone casts and you may not deviate from that option. Now that we've completed the trip from Saedrith Mora to Telfir, back to Saedrith Mora, I'll tell you a bit about that note we just delivered. The Mouth's master, Arion, is asking his former master, Divith Fyr, to join the Telvanni Council due to the incompetence of the current council members threatening the future of House Telvanni. Divith notes that Arion has a personal stake in the matter, and mentions that it doesn't really matter. Telvanni does not need him to survive. The note doesn't mention that Divith is busy, with his clone daughters. Although seriously, he is busy with Corpus, which is a bigger threat to Vvardenfell as a whole than the collapse of House Telvanni. Another task is to deliver a Cure Blight potion to Tel Voss, and we have to acquire the potion ourselves. This is simple enough, but while I'm there, I follow up on a lead from Master Arion's mouth, who, in the interest of moving on in his career, says that Arion may be willing to sponsor us. After delivering the potion, I fly up to meet Arion. A note about Tel Voss, it's one of the more interesting locations I've seen in an Elder Scrolls game, since its design is a reflection of the character of its owner. It's a fusion of the new Imperial architectural designs with the classic Telvanni Tower, which goes well with Arion, who is a Telvanni who's willing to bring Outlanders into the house. It's also a nightmare to navigate and figure out where the services are. Arion says he's willing to be our patron provided we convince Baladas Dimnavani to join the council. Now, funny thing, after this conversation, I immediately recall to the council hall and speak with Arion's mouth, who apparently has already spoken with Master Arion about my delivery, despite me actually, quite literally teleporting from Arion to him. Maybe that's the reason Mark and Recall got removed. Anyways, we journey to Nisus.
What do you seek in Nisus, Outlander?
To meet with Dimnavani. We start with the questions. Dimnavani's response depends on his disposition. Since this is my first meeting, it's actually quite low, and he gives me the obstructive answers, basically telling me that people like Gothrin, who have no interest in academics, really should not concern themselves with the dwarves. Should he like you, he basically gives you some theories that get confirmed during the Mages Guild questline, so hey, we formed a nice connection. We move on to the subject of him joining the council. He says it wouldn't bother him, provided we collect some literature for him. We need 3 books. Nunchek's Fire and Faith, Antecedents of Dwemer Law, and the Chronicles of Nushleft. I won't bore you with the details, but after collecting the books, he agrees to join the council and gives us Ondasai's Key and the Amulet of Admonition. The amulet paralyzes for 30 seconds while doing 1 to 2 points of frost damage for that time. This makes it quite powerful since it can paralyze so long, but a double-edged sword should it reflect. Ondasai's Key is a ring that opens 50 points on touch, basically magically opening most locked doors and chests, but not all of them. I complete another task of Arion's Mouth, who wants me to deliver some Daedra skin to Arion and get taught Paralyze for it. While I'm out there, Arion promotes me to Mouth, giving me a staff and new chores. I need to go cure his Quama Queen of Blight. This is convenient since I'm heading out that way on a new task from Gothrin's Mouth to collect some plans from Nushleft. I collect the plans, cure the queen, and return to Arion, who gives me a skill book in return. Skill books are good rewards, both for quests and for completing dungeons. Since skill ups are important to progression in Elder Scrolls, it seems like a good way to ensure players are properly leveling up to keep up with the requirements in their faction, but then again, that hasn't been important in a long time. Arion insists I go and learn some basic wizard spells. See? A magical quest line that highly emphasizes and requires the usage of magic. We need Levitate to get to Arion, we had to cure the Quama Queen with a spell, and we have to learn Recall, Fireball, and Levitate to continue progressing. Fireball is actually the only one I don't know. While going out to learn, I turn in the Scarab plans and get a Cephalopod helmet. This is another great reward as it allows you to summon a Dremora. We then get another skill book as a reward for learning the spells. You can probably guess that Telvanni is my favorite faction. It's objectively the best. It has the competent rewards, the best rule set, the best quests. It even has the lowest skill requirement of all the factions in the game, only requiring you get a single skill up to 70. We're tasked by Arion to assist Mylan Faram, who's being attacked by Hlaalu at Redoran. I know it was a long time ago, but yeah, we're crossing over with Rethen right now. I actually forgot this happened, but it's right here in my notes. My recording got cut short because I needed to charge the controller. Just one more reason I hate playing on the Xbox. So me and my new Dremora clear out the tower and I do a bit of soul trapping. Soul trapping in Morrowind is a somewhat minor thing. You can use souls to recharge enchanted items, which we'll talk about, but also to enchant items. The only problem is enchanting isn't all that great. It was actually a bit busted on Morrowind, and not in a good way. There are two ways to go about enchanting. You can take out a small loan of tens of thousands of gold to enchant at a services provider, or you can enchant yourself and usually fail. Your success of enchanting is tied to your enchant skill, but even maxing out your enchant skill and intelligence still results in a high chance of failure when enchanting. Enchanting also requires soul gems, which aren't as common as the later games, especially the higher tier ones. Well, they sort of are, just not at the levels I'm recording at. Now, when you hear about people breaking Morrowind, it tends to involve enchanting. This involves a healthy amount of exploiting the game and grinding your soul to eventually become useful. But I know I'll have the regulars sending me angry letters should I leave out the fact that yes, you can create an outfit that instantly restores all damage taken and constant effect restore health enchants. Just as spell creation allows you to utterly break this game, enchanting can take it a step further. Oh, right. This section is labeled soul trapping. You cast soul trap on a monster. When it dies, its soul fills a soul gem. Enchanted items are Morrowind. You can't have a Morrowind playthrough that does not eventually make a big point about them. They start out simple enough. Utility jewelry that can do something small like restore a little health, restore some stamina. Maybe if you're fancy, you have a recall or intervention amulet. Then you get something like the vampiric ring that drops enemies while healing you, or the amulet of shadows that allows you to disappear, and you realize enchanted items are awesome. It's a perfectly viable build to just collect enchanted damage rings you can spam on enemies until they stop moving. Your carry weight could be nothing but rings, amulets, and clothes that perform these functions, and the only downside is that your spell menu would look absolutely atrocious. Enchanted items are great rewards and more quests should give them. However, enchanted items are only as strong as the magic system supporting it, since using an enchanted item is basically casting a spell without the magic costs attached. Items have charges, sure, but that comes back with time, so as long as you aren't spamming the items constantly, you'll be fine. One downside I noticed with enchanted items is that if you are wearing a constant effect ring, that you might eventually take off the ring to make way for another. So it would be annoying to occasionally realize I'm no longer wearing the one ring because my character took it off to use the common ring of ironing clothes or something. Another thing is that it can be quite annoying to be using an enchanted weapon that has run out of charge, since it will constantly make this pleasant sound, while informing you that yes, you have indeed run out of charge with the weapon. Hey, Morrowind, you know that the upside of an enchanted sword over, say, an enchanted ring is that when the enchantment runs out, it still has the functions of a sword, right? So, somewhere in the plot, we're tasked with ending the Mages Guild monopoly on magical services in Redoran territory. What function this serves, I don't know. I don't think the Redorans are the type to use magical services all that often. Also, I decided to jump the gun on that Stronghold business. We need a construction contract, as usual, and 2 strong souls such as Winged Twilights, Golden Saints, or Storm Atronachs. This is to power the growth of the mushroom that will become my home.
It just stood there, holding its tail and whispering. What did it say?
Excuse me? So we go to talk with Zarethi at Arion's recommendation and says he does not trust my intentions, nor does he particularly like me, and he says goodbye. His tone changes at the bribe of a 100 gold, which is honorable, and I just feel that certain people should be impossible to bribe. He sees most of the counselors, barring Bolvin Venom, will support the resolution opposing the Mages Guild, provided I make an appeal to fairness. And sure enough, the Rethi and Ramarin are on board once I appeal to fairness. One vow to protect Vardenfell to the Duke later, and we've got the construction contract. Arion gives us one of his gloves as a reward for taking care of the Redoran thing, and... Okay, so Arion is known for enchanting a pair of powerful gloves. This is one of them, and it's known as Arion's Dominator. Its effect is to control humanoids up to level 15 for 2 minutes. Sounds innocuous, right? However, remember that NPCs generally don't move from their spots, and when I say command, I mean follow you through doors, follow you through fast travel, journey with you across the map. Command humanoid is basically the ability to abduct people and bring them anywhere you want, which is especially powerful since it can be done to people who provide services. Master trainers are generally around level 25, so they can't be affected, but yeah, don't like where the services are in a town, you can now move them. Arion wants me to save Favis Andes over in Shishi from Redoran attacks, which is another crossover quest, this time with House Redoran. I turn in the soul gems, which I appropriated from certain vendors, and get my stronghold on way. As you can see in this footage, I'm making full use of the Dominator in a tactical sense. However, and this point applies to summons as well, it's not that effective. The problem is the AI. Even on PC, even without the slow computation speed, pitting 2 AI against each other is a miserable affair. This makes Conjuration one of my least favorite skills, since half of the skill is about pitting AI against AI. Now don't get me wrong, I see the tactical advantages of summoning, but relying on summons and dominated creatures to fight for me? That's not happening. Only problem is that on occasions where I would try to use summons to distract a tough enemy, the tough enemy would just prioritize killing me anyways, as though it was aware that killing me ends the fight quicker. So dominating and summoning, while an amusing distraction, was pretty rare for me. It's certainly a viable playstyle, but I'd only recommend it if you're the sort to watch like AI fights on YouTube. Once we get to Shishi, we clear the place out. I actually managed to crash the game here. I dominated one of the Redoran soldiers while using a Dremora to fight another. Then when I tried to kill the last soldier, my dominated one, my Dremora turned on me, assuming I had betrayed the cause. The second he killed me, my game crashed, as though it was thoroughly confused and realized that that probably should not have happened. So yeah, add that to the list of reasons I don't use Conjuration. Favis, now free, gives me some skill books. He says he's studied them thoroughly, which makes sense, he's been in this basement for a while. That does beg the question though, why you wouldn't just intervention out, you're a wizard. This must be why you're living in Shishi. Arion says in order to advance I need my own mouth on the council and says he's heard of a Telvanni in Balmora that was promising. Sure enough, one of the Hlaalu guards figures fast Eddie is the man, and Ed the man is willing to be my mouth, but he needs a silver staff of peace. Did I mention that earlier? Yeah, when I became a mouth I got one. Luckily I kept it. I can imagine a few players being slightly inconvenienced after having sold theirs. Anyways, Ed becomes my mouth and I get told to check on my stronghold at Uverith's grave. It's a bit macabre of a name, isn't it? Anyways, the foreman says it's going to be fine and I check out a Dwemer ruin while I'm there. I find some schematics and a Dwemer crossbow and spend a few days selling loot to a Clavicus Vile minion in Caldera, Then my Stronghold manager says I need to post 5,000 gold in any schematics I find in a ruin named Mezankind. Just so happens I found the plan she's looking for. I may have looked at the wiki for this quest beforehand. As a reward for finding a mouth, Arion gives me his other glove, and I'll tell you about this one later. Arion is impressed we've risen so quickly, which is an understatement as I've soared through the ranks of Telvanni in about 2 weeks. He figures the only way forward is to take care of some up-and-comers in the other houses. A Hlaalu has constructed a stronghold without contract at the Odai Plateau. Sure enough, I take on Rethin at Odai, which was an easy fight. She tries to silence me, but silence doesn't work on enchanted items. And behold, Arion's helpers. Yeah, this right here lags my game, but it is quite effective. A Flame, Frost, and Storm Atronak summoned simultaneously. Our next task is to take down another stronghold, this time at Bal Isra, and kill the Redoran in Daris. I decide to have a little fun and treat this one like a battle. His guards are willing to just let me go down and murder him, but I make them fight me. I steal some clutter, which angers everyone in the manor, then use Arion's helper and the Dremora summon and turn the manor into a giant clusterfuck. Just watch. Arion is naturally impressed with this, and I suppose I should talk about the House Wars. Each great house has quests to assassinate your equivalent in the other house, the rising stars who are doing the quests you get locked out of. I named each character after their version, so Hlaalu was Rethin, Redoran was Indaris, and Telvanni was Uvarith. In retrospect, considering how fantastically Uvarith's attack on Rethin and Indaris went, I want to say it's canon, but sadly, it can't be. Because Rethin and Indaris are in part 5, but Uvarith didn't get a follow-up. Tel Uvarith became Uvarith's grave, sadly. Rethin killed him while Indaris didn't engage in the House Wars. So what happens in the non-canon timeline? Well, Arion says that there are 2 paths. We can become a master, like Arion, and hold a spot on the council, or we can become a magister, which announces that I am worthy of the rank of Archmagister. I think there's only one choice. We go to Talmora and confront Gothrin. He has nothing to say to us, and so begins the wizard duel. I silence Gothrin, send in the squad, who fights Gothrin's own duo of Dremora, and kill Gothrin with my special mysticism technique of absorbing health. It's a good fight, a damn good fight. Fittingly, there's a book titled The Final Lesson in his tower, and with that, Arion names me Archmagister of House Telvanni. This, however, is fanfiction. Gothrin yet lives and Uvarith, sadly, doesn't. The Great Houses of Morrowind are a really great storyline emblematic of the game. To contrast, Oblivion was originally intended to allow you to become the Count of Kvatch following its destruction, but this was cut according to Todd Howard because it apparently detracted from the main questline. Skyrim had the Civil War, a literal red versus blue fight between 2 factions that were both kind of right, although the Stormcloaks were better, suck it Reds. The Great Houses, though, to have not 1 but 2 separate questlines that become exclusive when you pick one. I mean, modern Bethesda loves the whole only create 1 character and experience everything design philosophy. Even when they have multiple factions like in Fallout 4, they fuck it up by having all the factions still complete the same story beats. Each faction is also properly represented in their quests. Hlaalu is about being sneaky and conniving, and you make a ton of money doing it. Redoran is about honor, and honor doesn't pay. Telvanni is all about the acquisition of power and rewards you with powerful artifacts. However, a problem I have with the houses is that they don't quite fit with hybrid classes. It makes sense for each guild to correspond to its specialization, fighters to fighters guild, thieves to thieves guild, mages to mages guild. But then the houses do the same exact thing. It'd be great if, for example, heavy armor was a part of the philosophy of House Telvanni, but secretly all Telvanni cheat and bind theirs. It'd certainly make Divith Fear, fully clad in real Daedric armor, much cooler as a consequence. Or illusion magic is a part of Hlaalu, or mysticism a part of Redoran. Just something that makes Telvanni feel more like a faction instead of just the Mages Guild for Dunmer hipsters. If you look on most of Morrowind's materials, you see the 3 house names on them, but you also see the name Endoral. I think it was pretty smart to keep Endoral out of Morrowind. I personally think it would have crowded the space to have a 4th great house. Same goes for House Dress. I feel if the greater mainland of Morrowind had been a part of the original game, then it would have fit in as a sort of competing mainland powers. Perhaps a story of tribunal traditionalists versus Daedric worshippers, as is technically already the case. But as it stands, House Dress only gets paid lip service in Morrowind, which was a shame because, well, it was retconned into being destroyed in Skyrim. I mention Endoral and Dress because they helped to fill out the roster for House Dagoth, the forbidden 6th house. For years, I've heard a rumor that Bethesda originally intended to let the player join the 6th house. Researching this was difficult since there are mods that entail this that muddy the waters. Some have alluded to the content being in the game files, but this is not the case, as according to both the UESP and the cutting room floor, no such quests or scripts exist in the game files. I've searched around for some hints at interviews that would suggest this information or where this misconception came from, but alas, I couldn't find any. If joining the 6th house wasn't a design document, it got cut very early. As for the main 3, a good balance. I handily ranked Telvanni at number 1 while Hlaalu and Redoran tied 2 for a variety of reasons. Redoran has some better quests, but the lack of payment really dragged it down. Hlaalu has some more menial quests, but it has enough intrigue to entertain. Stay tuned for part 5, where I'll be discussing the 4 remaining factions of Morrowind.